What if I told you that every hour you've worked, every degree you've earned, every promotion you've chased was part of a lie designed to keep you from seeing the real wealth system? What if hard work was never the path to riches, but a story told to the people locked out of the system that actually creates wealth? Here's the truth they'll never teach you in school, never mention on CNBC, never admit in economics textbooks. Wealth in America isn't built by working hard. It's built by having access to cheap money before everyone else. Right now, 24 banks can borrow billions of dollars from the Federal Reserve at 0.25% interest. They take that money, buy stocks, real estate, bonds, and watch prices inflate. By the time you get a loan at 7% for a mortgage, 9% for a car, 22% for a credit card, those assets are already overpriced. You're buying at the top. They bought at the bottom. You work 50 hours a week. They print money and buy assets. You save in dollars that lose 3 to 7% purchasing power annually. They leverage cheap debt and compound wealth. You're not failing. You're playing a different game with different rules. Before we go deeper, drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and how many hours a week do you work? Because this video will show you why effort doesn't correlate with wealth anymore, and what does. Hit that subscribe button for the unfiltered truth about the access system. Let's start in 1913, the year they built two Americas. December 23rd, 1913. Most of Congress had left Washington for Christmas break. In a near-empty chamber, the Federal Reserve Act was passed and signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson. The official story? America needed a central bank to stabilize the economy, prevent bank panics, and manage the money supply for the public good. The reality? The Federal Reserve was designed by bankers for bankers to ensure that a select group of institutions would have permanent, privileged access to the money creation system. Here's what they didn't tell you. The Federal Reserve isn't federal. It's not owned by the government. It's a quasi-private institution owned by member banks, the very banks it's supposed to regulate. And from day one, it created a two-tiered system. Tier 1. Banks with direct access to the Fed. They can borrow unlimited amounts at the discount rate, historically near zero. They get first access to newly created money. Tier 2. Everyone else. You, me, small businesses. We borrow from Tier 1 banks at whatever rate they set, always higher, always after inflation has already hit. This isn't capitalism. This is financial feudalism with a modern interface. Sound familiar? Because this is the exact structure we live under today. The names have changed: discount window, primary dealers, quantitative easing, but the mechanism is identical. Let's fast forward to 1971. Richard Nixon ends the gold standard. The dollar is no longer backed by anything except the government's promise. What does that mean? It means the Fed can now create unlimited money. No constraints, no accountability, just keystrokes on a computer. And who gets that money first? Not workers, not savers, not small businesses. It goes to the same banks that have had access since 1913. The same institutions, the same families, the same system. Between 1971 and 2024, the money supply increased over 3,000%. Productivity increased 250%. Real wages for the bottom 90%. Flat, stagnant, basically unchanged. Sound familiar? Because you've lived this. You've watched your parents' generation buy homes on single incomes. You've watched housing prices triple while your salary barely moves. You've worked harder, gotten more educated, produced more value, and you can't afford what your grandparents bought working at a factory. Why? Because the wealth didn't disappear. It was transferred through inflation, through asset price appreciation, through the two-tiered system. Here's how it works. The Fed creates $1 trillion. It doesn't hand that money to you. It uses it to buy bonds from primary dealers, a list of 24 hand-picked financial institutions. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, Bank of America, Barclays, Deutsche Bank. These banks get $1 trillion in cash. Instantly, they turn around and buy assets, stocks, real estate, corporate bonds, commodities. Asset prices rise. They profit. Months later, sometimes years later, that money trickles into the broader economy as wages, if you're lucky. But by then, the cost of housing, food, healthcare, and education has already inflated. You earn dollars. They earn assets. You save in depreciating currency. They leverage cheap debt to buy appreciating property. You work for money. They make money work for them using money they borrowed at rates you'll never access. Sound familiar? Because this happened in 2008. The banks crashed the economy with reckless bets. The Fed bailed them out with $700 billion in TARP funds and $16 trillion in secret loans. Loans we didn't even know about until a 2011 congressional audit. While 10 million Americans lost their homes, The banks that caused the crisis got zero-interest loans, permission to buy distressed assets at pennies on the dollar, record profits by 2010, and bonuses that made executives richer than before the crash. You lost your job. They got free money. You lost your home. They bought real estate at a discount. You lost your savings. They multiplied their wealth. And it happened again in 2020. COVID hits. The economy freezes. 20 million people lose their jobs. What does the Fed do? Cut rates to zero. Print $4.5 trillion. Buy corporate bonds. Backstop money markets. Inject unlimited liquidity into financial institutions. The stock market crashes in March. By June, it's at all-time highs. Billionaires gained $2.1 trillion in 2020 alone. You got $1,200. This isn't a glitch. This is the system working exactly as designed. There are two economies, two sets of rules, two interest rates. One for people with access, one for people without. And the hardest workers? They're in the second economy. Always borrowing expensive money to buy overpriced assets. Always running to stay in place. The system doesn't reward effort. It rewards proximity. And proximity is determined by one thing: access to the Federal Reserve's money pipeline. So how do you get access? How do you become one of the 24? You don't. The list of primary dealers is controlled by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. It's not elected. It's not democratic. It's a private decision made by an institution owned by the banks it regulates. And once you're on the list, you stay on the list. Generationally, institutionally, permanently. But here's where it gets darker. The system isn't just about cheap loans. It's about information. Primary dealers don't just get money first, they get information first. They know when the Fed is going to cut rates before the public does. They know how much liquidity will be injected before it's announced. They know which assets the Fed will buy before the purchases happen. This is legal insider trading. If you're a primary dealer, you can position your bets before the Fed moves. You buy assets before the liquidity hits. You profit on the announcement. Retail investors, people like you, find out when it's on CNBC. By then, the move is priced in. You're late. You're always late. This is information asymmetry at a systemic level. And it's not just the Fed. During the 2008 crisis, Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson, former CEO of Goldman Sachs, held private meetings with Wall Street executives before the public knew how bad things were. He told them which banks would be saved and which would die, weeks before the announcements. Goldman Sachs survived. Lehman Brothers didn't. Paulson decided. A former Goldman CEO decided that his former company would live and its competitor would collapse. This is the revolving door. And it's how access becomes permanent. Treasury secretaries come from Wall Street. They return to Wall Street. While in office, they write rules that favor Wall Street. Then they get paid $10 million a year in consulting fees as a thank you. It's not corruption. Corruption implies it's illegal. This is policy. This is structure. This is the design. But who actually architected this system? Who decided in 1913 that there would be two Americas, one with access and one without? You won't believe the names. And the receipt is wilder than you think. Let's break down the exact mechanics of the access system, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Mechanism 1. The primary dealer privilege. A primary dealer is a financial institution authorized to trade directly with the Federal Reserve. There are exactly 24 of them as of 2024. Here's what that means in practice. When the U.S. Treasury issues $100 billion in bonds, primary dealers are required to buy them at auction. Sounds like a burden, right? Wrong, because immediately after the auction, the Federal Reserve buys those bonds from the primary dealers at a higher price through open market operations. Let's say the dealer buys $10 billion in bonds at auction for $9.95 billion. The Fed buys them the next day for $10 billion. The dealer just made $50 million risk-free. Multiply that across trillions of dollars in Treasury issuance annually, and you're looking at tens of billions in guaranteed profit. But that's just the surface. Primary dealers also have access to the Fed's discount window, a lending facility where they can borrow unlimited amounts at the discount rate. During the 2008 crisis, that rate was 0.5%. During COVID, it was 0.25%. If you're a primary dealer, you can borrow $10 billion at 0.25% annually and invest it in stocks yielding 10% annually, real estate appreciating 8% annually, or corporate bonds yielding 5%. You borrow at 0.25%. You earn 5 to 10%. You keep the spread forever. This is free money. It's not a loan in any real sense. It's a wealth transfer mechanism. Mechanism 2. The repo market overnight wealth multiplication. Now let's talk about the repo market. Most people have never heard of it, but it processes $4 to $5 trillion daily. That's more than the entire GDP of Japan. Every single day. Here's how it works. A hedge fund owns $1 billion in treasury bonds. They sell those bonds to a primary dealer with an agreement to buy them back the next day. The dealer gives them $1 billion in cash overnight. The hedge fund uses the cash to make leverage bets by stocks, derivatives, whatever. The next day, they buy the bonds back for $1 billion plus 0.05% interest. They just borrowed $1 billion for one day at an annualized rate of 0.05%. You can't do that. Your credit card charges 22%. Your mortgage charges 7%. Your car loan charges 9%. But if you're in the Access Network primary dealers, hedge funds, institutional investors, you can borrow billions at functionally zero cost. And when this system breaks like it did in September 2019, when repo rates spiked to 10% overnight, the Fed steps in with unlimited liquidity to stabilize it. They will never let it fail. Because the people who would lose are the people who own the system. Mechanism 3. Quantitative easing, the wealth transfer machine. Let's talk about QE. Quantitative easing. Sounds technical. Sounds necessary. Here's what it really is. The Fed creates money digitally, trillions of dollars, and uses it to buy bonds and mortgage-backed securities from primary dealers. The dealers get cash. Lots of it. What do they do with it? They buy assets. Stocks, real estate, corporate bonds. Asset prices rise. Wealthy people who own assets get wealthier. Let's look at the numbers. From 2008 to 2014 QE1, 2, and 3, the Fed balance sheet went from $800 billion to $4.5 trillion. The S&P 500 went from 683 to 2,059, a 200% gain. Median home price went from $198,000 to $270,000, a 36% gain. Median household income went from $52,000 to $54,000, a 4% gain. From 2020 to 2022 COVID QE, the Fed balance sheet went from $4 trillion to $9 trillion. The S&P 500 went from 2237 to 4766, a 113% gain in 2 years. Median home price went from $270,000 to $420,000, a 55% gain. Median household income went from $68,000 to $74,000, a 9% gain. Notice the pattern? Assets owned by the wealthy appreciate 100 to 200%. Income earned by workers rises 4 to 9%. This is the wealth transfer. It's not a theory. It's documented. It's measurable. And it's accelerating. Mechanism 4. The Cantillon effect. First wins, last loses. Richard Cantillon, an 18th century economist, observed that when new money is created, it doesn't spread evenly through the economy. The people closest to the money creation benefit first. By the time it reaches the general population, prices have already risen. This is the Cantillon effect. And it explains everything. When the Fed prints $5 trillion, Stage 1, day 1 to 30, primary dealers get $5 trillion in cash. They buy stocks, bonds, real estate at current prices. Stage 2, month 2 to 6, asset prices rise. The top 10%, who own 89% of stocks, see their portfolios inflate. Home prices rise. The wealthy get wealthier. Stage 3, month 6 to 24. The new money slowly trickles into wages, social programs, consumer spending. But by now, rent has gone up 20%. Groceries cost 15% more. Gas is up 30%. You get the money last, after prices have risen. You're earning in inflated dollars to buy inflated goods. The wealthy got the money when it was worth the most. You get it when it's worth the least. This is the hidden tax. This is how hard work becomes meaningless. Mechanism 5. The credit caste system. Let's talk about interest rates, because this is where the lie becomes obvious. In 2020 to 2022, the Fed funds rate was 0 to 0.25%. That's the rate banks charge each other for overnight loans. If you're a primary dealer, you can borrow at that rate, or close to it. But what rate do you pay? Mortgage, 3 to 7%, 12 to 28 times higher. Auto loan, 4 to 9%, 16 to 36 times higher. Credit card, 18 to 25%, 72 to 100 times higher. Student loan, 4 to 8%, 16 to 32 times higher. Same Federal Reserve, same monetary system, same economy, but two completely different interest rate structures. Why? Because you're in the second tier. You don't have access. You're not part of the network. The primary dealers borrow cheap and lend expensive. They're the middlemen extracting wealth from your labor. And it's legal. It's policy. It's the system. Mechanism 6. The bailout guarantee. Moral hazard at scale. Here's the final piece. Moral hazard. If you're a primary dealer or a systemically important financial institution, you can take infinite risk because you know the Fed will bail you out. The track record proves it. 1998. Long-term capital management bailout. 2008. Bear Stearns, AIG, Citigroup, Bank of America $16 trillion in bailouts. 2020. Unlimited Fed liquidity, corporate bond purchases, repo backstops. Every time, the same institutions get saved. Every time, they profit. Because they're too big to fail. But what that really means is, too connected to fail. If you're in the Access network, you can gamble with unlimited leverage. If you win, you keep the profits. If you lose, taxpayers cover the loss via Fed money printing. This isn't capitalism. It's a state-guaranteed casino where only insiders get to play. Mechanism 7. The revolving door permanent institutional capture. Let's not forget who runs this system. Treasury secretaries and Fed chairs are almost always former Wall Street executives who returned to Wall Street after their government service. Robert Rubin, Goldman Sachs, then Treasury Secretary, then Citigroup $126 million. Hank Paulson, Goldman Sachs CEO, then Treasury Secretary, then orchestrated bailouts that saved Goldman. Tim Geithner, New York Fed, then Treasury Secretary, then Warburg Pincus $10 million per year. Janet Yellen, Fed Chair, then $7.2 million in Wall Street speaking fees, then Treasury Secretary. Steve Mnuchin, Goldman Sachs, then Treasury Secretary, then returned to private equity. The people who decide who gets access are the same people who came from and return to the institutions that benefit. This is institutional capture. It's permanent. It's structural. It's the design. Mechanism 8. Why hard work can never compete. Here's the brutal math. Let's say you're a disciplined saver. You work hard, live below your means, save 20% of your income. You earn $75,000 per year. You save $15,000 annually. You invest it in the S&P 500, which averages 10% annually. After 30 years, you'll have approximately $2.7 million. Sounds good, right? Now let's compare that to someone with access. A hedge fund manager borrows $100 million from the Fed at 0.25% via the discount window and repo markets. They invested at 10% in the S&P 500. After 1 year, they've made $10 million profit, 10% return minus 0.25% cost. They've made in 1 year what it would take you over 3 lifetimes to accumulate, and they didn't work for it. They had access. This is why hard work is a lie. It's not that effort doesn't matter. It's that effort without access is a rounding error compared to access without effort. So where does this leave us? The system is accelerating. The gap between those with access and those without is widening every day. The Fed's balance sheet is still over $7 trillion. When the next crisis hits, and it will, they'll print another $5 trillion, maybe $10 trillion. And it will all go to the same 24 institutions, the same access network, the same people. While you lose your job, they'll buy assets at a discount. While you struggle with inflation, they'll leverage cheap debt. While you work harder, they'll get richer doing nothing. This is the future, unless you see the game. Here's the final brutal truth. The American dream was never about rewarding hard work. It was about convincing you that effort matters, so you wouldn't question why access is the only variable that actually determines wealth. You were told to work hard, go to college, save money, invest for retirement. And you did. And you're still broke. Not because you failed, but because you were playing the wrong game. The real game is access. And access is gatekept by 24 institutions, a revolving door of Wall Street executives in government, and a Federal Reserve that serves banks, not people. You can't change the system, but you can stop believing its lies. You can stop blaming yourself for a rigged game. You can stop thinking hard work will save you when the system is designed to extract from labor and reward capital. And you can start building wealth outside the traditional system through businesses, skills, real assets, networks. So I'll leave you with this. Are we wiser now, or are we just better educated serfs who've mistaken our chains for opportunity? Drop your thoughts below. Subscribe if this shattered the illusion. Share this with anyone who still believes the system rewards merit. The truth doesn't need access, but we do.